can see my presentation, and I would like to welcome you too to the first Athena IP Day. And I will talk about shaping our future, the importance of IP for researchers from an administrative perspective, because as it has been said, I'm a patent scout or IP manager at University Siegen, and my position is seated at the legal department, and therefore I'm part of the administration and not of the academia, of the scientific part of our university. So I have structured my talk into parts. Part A, administration and academia. What's IP got to do with it? And in the second part, I will talk about opportunities offered by IP for young scientists and, of course, not so young scientists too. Since my job is seated at the administration of the university, one can ask of the relation between administration and academia. Traditionally, the administration served the academia. Administration enabled academia to do science and research in the first place. We did the accounting, we provided buildings and furniture and so on. But of course, a modern understanding of administration understands administration not only as a servant of academia, but as a partner. And we actively try to support our scientists and researchers to get the best results in their work. And so University Siegen has a patent scout. We have as a support structure. And as I said, I'm seated at the legal department, which makes legal disputations quite short and not too long. And my job is to care for IP at the university. So I'm a gopher for everything in relation to IP. And the goal of my work is not only to do the administration of intellectual property, but to look together with the scientists and researchers what to do with the IP to get the best results for the university, but also, of course, for the science done here. So, academia and administration, we work together, and then we see what to do with the IP and what opportunities it offers us. And as I said, I'm not the only supportive structure. We have a lot of support structures here, but the most important ones in my regard are, on the one hand, the research service, an organization which supports scientists to identify best funding schemes and writing the best project applications in order to get funded. And on the other hand, we have a great startup center and young students and researchers who not only want to produce results, but to use them themselves and live their entrepreneurial ideas. They come to me in the moment when they learn that intellectual property rights build a cornerstone of their startup. And of course, not always supportive, but in IP questions, the last resort is the legal department itself, because all contracts and contractual agreements go over their table, and if IP-related issues are identified, I'm directly informed. So academia and administration try their best, and if you want to learn more about my area, you can go to my site or to the site of the University Siegen. So what is the best? IP BET offers opportunities for young researchers and old ones, of course, and it does it not only for the researchers themselves, but also for the university as a whole. And how do we do it? Our first focus is on the research results, but they always come with some legal status, and we have to care for it too. And we have two modes of using intellectual property rights to reach our goals. We have, on the one hand, the economic exploitation of research results and corresponding intellectual property rights, and we have the scientific exploitation. And I'm sure Mr. Dornbusch will tell you a lot, can tell you a lot about economic exploitation of research results and corresponding intellectual property rights. So I focus on this scientific exploitation. This is important for our organization, for our institution. And there are different modes of scientific exploitation of research results. Of course, a publication is standard mode of exploit your results, but especially in case of patents, it's not only one publication, but it might be an additional publication, since you have a scientific, maybe peer-reviewed paper, and on the other hand, you have a office-reviewed patent publication. And the patent, of course, can serve as a proof of excellence of your work, and it might even be a proof of relevance of your work, since science is not an art pour l'art anymore, but it should have some impact on our society, and intellectual property rights can document such a relevance to our society. And of course, these proofs of excellence, or proofs of relevance, are a very important means to the goal of acquisition of more funds, since all universities nowadays need third-party funds to do their research. We are making this issue very strong, and patents and other intellectual property rights help us in the acquisition of more third-party funds. In my area, there are indeed pure validation projects where patents are validated. So one can say that the university Siegen earned the six-digit number of funds for validation projects. But even more interesting are industry and non-economic projects with public partners, where intellectual property rights are also very important. And last but not least, in this on this day, networking. Intellectual property rights, especially if produced with partners from other institutions, lead to more intense networking, and this might lead to follow-up results. But of course, it's not only good for our organization, but for the scientists, especially for young scientists working here. So intellectual property rights might foster your scientific reputation, since it is a proof of the excellence of your work, and patents, for example, serve as an additional publication on your publication list. And yes, third-party funds are very important for scientists to do their work. And again, a proof of excellence and proof of relevance of their work. And all this provides you as a scientist with an additional vocational training for free, which again can foster your career inside or outside academia. And last but not least, intellectual property rights might provide you with your professional future if you learn that you can build an interesting business model based on the IP you've produced. And you might try to build up a startup and then get rich. Yeah, maybe. But all these points are not single standing points, but they might build a process through your career. So you produce research results, and the IPRs coming with them give you some reputation outside the scientific realm, which leads again to third-party funds. And if you are lucky, you will do it not one time or two times, but even more times, and you get even more experience with IP, which gives you a lot of skills for your professional life, and maybe even lead to a profession inside a startup or outside in the academy. And yeah, maybe you get rich by working. Yeah, I thank you very much, and I'm happy. Looking forward to the discussion afterwards. And now I'm very interested in the words of Dornbusch. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much, Dorothea, for the very kind introduction, and of course, actually for inviting me to this interesting and challenging event. I must say that I'm a strong believer by heart, so to say, that regarding the title of the event, innovating for a better future, that IP does or can at least play and will play a major role in shaping our future as a society, but also, of course, as an individual researcher. Maybe if you allow me to introduce PROvendis in a couple of sentences. We consider ourselves being among the largest European service providers in the field of technology transfer and IP management. We established in 2002, a subsidiary of 28 universities in North Rhine-Westphalia. The University of Siegen is one of them. And we do actually work for universities, university hospitals, research institutions, companies, of course, and startups, a lot of startups actually in the last years. In the course of the last 20 years, we did evaluate some 7,000 inventions so far, still counting, which is actually is quite a lot. And I'm proud to say that most of our employees are employed at PROvendis for at least 10 years. Some of them are actually started with the company on day one, 20 years ago. So we actually consider ourselves being very experienced in this topic. Today's, or at least the title of the Impulse talk of Christian and myself is Shaping Our Future, the Importance of IP for Researchers. And yeah, actually, the idea is here to talk about the impact of intellectual property on your personal academic and professional career. Christian already mentioned a couple of good arguments. And we will also strive on how collaboration between universities, industry, and researchers resulting in IP will have a major influence on your and on our overall economic and social development. I hope you can feel that I'm really a strong believer in this topic. But in order to get into the topic, I think it's interesting to first try to understand better what a patent or what IP is actually all about, and maybe even more important, what's behind it. because on the first sight, looking at IP, especially a patent on first sight, you see a more or less lengthy document written by a patent attorney, in most cases purposely written in some kind of secret language, not one that you would actually use on a daily basis, or someone with a common sense would use in real life. And in addition, it's not easy to find patents in databases and to evaluate those things that you do find for your individual needs. It's actually complicated. You do need experts, and those experts are in most cases costly. If you have ever seen an invoice from a patent attorney, you know what I'm talking about. Actually, if you ask me personally, reading and filing patent as such is probably as much fun as writing your annual tax statement. It's kind of, you could even say, boring, or some people do like it, especially patent attorneys. I'm personally speaking more interested in what's actually behind it and what kind of opportunities patents and IP provides. As I said already, for the society, but also for us as individuals. And in order to do so, I think it's important to have an insight that what IP is actually, how it's defined, what it's actually all about. And since this is a event also partly hosted by WIPO, I think it's a good idea to check the WIPO sites, what WIPO says about IP. You can find here, it's a quotation, of course, IP is protected in law by examples, patents, copyright, and trademarks, which enable people to earn recognition or financial benefit from what they invent or create. By striking the right balance between the interests of innovators and the wider public interest, the IP system aims to foster an environment in which creativity and innovation can flourish. And I think this is actually the fun part, or the interesting part. And I really apologize for bothering you with even more definitions, but I think it's important to know what a patent actually is or can be. And WIPO says then further on, a patent is an exclusive right granted for an invention, which is a product or process that provides, in general, a new way of doing something or offers a new technical solution to a problem. And this is exactly where patents and IP in general becomes interesting within view on today's major problems, and more importantly, to its solutions. And then we actually come back to the title of the whole event, Innovating for a Better Future. I think as of today, it has never been more obvious that we will need really major technological and commercial solutions to the challenges of climate change, digitalization, and the protection of resources, and so on. I mean, it's an endless list, and I think we have never been faced with more and bigger challenges than in actually these very days, or at least years. If you look at the climate change, what's going on in the world, it's basically every day that we see a new weather record somewhere in the world. This might be Australia, South Africa recently. Madrid today has 30 centimeters of snow at the end of April. That didn't happen for a couple of decades. So something is going on, and we do need to work on that. And actually, those solutions are very likely to be found and invented at our universities, done and on the basis of your individual research, the research of young researchers. And your input, your hard work is needed to work on these topics. And this will literally shape our future. If you don't do it, if you don't work on this problem, there will hardly be any. It's hard as it is. There will be hardly any future. But it's just not sufficient to find the technical solutions. Of course, they are needed. Without the technical solution, it's not going to work. In order to generate an impact from research to society, it will be necessary to transfer these solutions into application. And this means in our economic system that we have today, we have to transfer innovation, research findings from university, from academia, into marketable services and products. And this is exactly where IP has a major role to play. You will hardly find any company. I know this from actually my daily work. As I said, we are we have 20 years of experience with commercializing, with talking to companies, also talking to startup companies. And you will hardly find a company that's willing to make any effort in bringing products to the market without having the necessary intellectual property. It's a prerequisite for commercial success. It's a prerequisite for any kind of activity when it comes to production or bringing products to the market. And therefore, IP is in most cases is simply the basis for all economic practices. There might be very few exemptions, but especially today, especially also in the world of digitalization, there are other ways of protecting your IP, all the way to protecting know-how, for instance. It gets a little bit more complicated there. It's not everything. Not everything can be handled with a straight patent, but there are not only possibilities but also necessities to do so. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Yes, and this actually will have an impact on your career, because you will be an even more interesting cooperation partner for third-party funding. Christian mentioned this already, so this is actually benefit number one. As long as you're at the university and you want maybe to prolong your research contracts whatsoever, you have to be interesting for in most cases at least, for cooperation partners from industry. And by having IP filed, you are becoming much more interesting than without any IP. And in addition, also that was mentioned by Christian, you might just benefit personally and directly by enjoying 30% compensation for your invention as an employee. That's at least the law in Germany. I'm not quite familiar with the laws in the rest of Europe, but there are similar laws applies in other countries. And this can actually be a lot. It's in most cases not the driving force, so to say, for researchers, but it can be very interesting. Occasionally we are negotiating contracts worth actually millions of euros, and 30% of which is actually quite a nice sum. So it can actually pay off directly, and yeah, you might benefit directly from this. And then the third part, so to say, and this is becoming more and more interesting these days in the last couple of, say, 4 or 5 years especially, is to actually start your own company based on the invention you made as a researcher. And also this was mentioned by Christian, but if you want to be successful with a newly started company, you have to have IP. You will hardly find any company that's at least coming technology-based startup company from a university that's successful even after, say, 5, 6, 7 years, that is not based on IP or does not have at least a solid IP basis. It's hardly any exception from this rule, actually. And yeah, as I said in the beginning, it is, of course, it's a time-consuming process to get IP filed and to get intellectual properties protected. But the good news is there's help available. And again, I don't know the systems in the rest of Europe, but for North Rhine-Westphalia, I can say that we are grateful for some public support here as well. But we are able to provide really very good and free of charge services to researchers that do have an idea, that want to look into the patent databases and want to protect their IP. And it might be interesting, but there's professional help available. And so I do actually hope that you get a more positive view on patents than just the fact that they are complicated and costly. And maybe to try to sum up what has been said so far, at least by me and partly also by Christian, is you have it in your hands. You can shape your own future by becoming an interesting cooperation partner due to or based on IP, you might benefit directly from the inventor's compensation, and as I say this again, I think this is a very interesting way, especially for the future. You can start your own company with the things that you invented at university. And so finally, I do hope that when you get back to your research work tomorrow, you will consider your research findings are worth protecting, or at least give it a check if they are worth protecting. And if they have the potential to shape your individual future on a professional and in a professional way, and also helping shape the future of our society. Thank you very much.